Welcome back. Now to our next conversation. The Federal Inland Revenue Service has appealed the judgment of the Federal High Court in Port Harcourt, which issued an order restraining it from collecting value-added tax and personal income tax in Rivers State. The court had directed the Rivers State government to take charge of the collection, and this has generated another line of conversation, which we are following up now with Adeyemi Adediran, partner at Anderson, Nigeria. Great to have you on the program. Good morning.
Good to have you, Mr. Adediran.
Thanks for having me.
So what is the impact of this ruling on VAT collection and the federal government's drive for revenue generation?
Well, I would say it's interesting that this is not the first time that the court will be ruling on the constitutional validity of the Value-Added Tax Act, right? Just last year, there was that Ukala versus FIRS case, where the ruling was similar to the Rivers State's ruling that we received some few days ago. The main thrust of this is that the collection of consumption taxes is not in the exclusive list of the Constitution. Therefore, I mean, saying that the National Assembly really doesn't have any legal competence to enact laws for collection of consumption taxes. And that's the main thrust of the conversation. And then if you're looking at the impact of this ruling, right, if it's sustained, just last year, the federal government collected about 1.5 trillion in VAT. Yeah. If you look at the way the law has said VAT should be shared, 15 to the federal, 50 to the states, and then 35 to the local governments. If you do 15% of 1.5 trillion, that's about 225 billion naira, you know. So if this ruling is sustained, what that means is that the federal government has the possibility of the federal government losing about that amount, you know, if you know, translate that to the current year.
What about the cost of collection?
Yeah, the cost of collection is 4%. It's not included in the 15%, right? Now, the challenge, again, from what you just said now is that the state may not be efficient, you know, enough to actually collect these taxes. So collecting 225 billion may be a tall order if the rule is reversed. But this also brings to fore, you know, the conversation about federalism, you know, that has been held on other spheres of the government. So it's interesting to see how this will unfold, because I see it going to the appellate court, that's the Supreme Court, yeah.
And you talked about the impact it will have on the federal government. Obviously, the federal government will lose that amount of money. The state stands a chance of getting it if they can manage. But what impact does it have on the taxpayers?
Well, for the taxpayers, really, the question really right now that many taxpayers are asking, you know, is certainty, you know. One of the canons of taxation is that, okay, you have to be certain of the tax that you have to pay to the government, and the government is also certain of the tax to collect. So right now, with the case unfolding, many taxpayers are saying that should we collect or continue to charge VAT, you know, or not. But I understand the Federal Inland Revenue Service has appealed the judgment, and they've also submitted an application for stay of execution. So as it stands, if the application of the FIRS is granted, you know, then taxpayers can continue to charge VAT. But everyone should monitor development in this space and see where it leads.
So, but if this judgment is sustained, wouldn't it create some kind of inequality among states?
Yeah, like you rightly said, that's a great question, because not all states are on the same level in terms of economic activities. Right. But I think it will also drive efficiency, because every state has something to offer. You know, if you go to Plateau State, I mean, they have a lot of agricultural activities going on there. Lagos has a lot of commerce going on. Rivers State has a lot of oil and business going on there. So every state has something to offer. So I believe that if every state gets to that point that, hey, I'm going to actually eat what I kill. In other words, I'm going to charge VAT on what is consumed in my state. I think those conversations in terms of how do I improve the efficiency of the state's economy will begin to come up. And I think at the end of the day... Yeah, exactly.
I think it sounds like what we should pursue, that because, I mean, we've been talking about diversification in the economy. So states know that they don't have the opportunity to go to Abuja and get.
Yeah.
So you now, don't you think it would do us better?
Right. Yeah, in the long run, but in the short run, you know, some states are already used to, you know, getting, you know, money from the federal government. So in the short run, it may be some form of challenge because, I mean, they are not even prepared for the collection of these taxes, you know. So it will take some time before everybody sits up and say, hey, if I do more and enact laws and I'm more efficient in the running of my state, you know, I can actually get more money, you know. So it's attractive in the long run, but in the short run, those challenges will still be there.
Okay, what is the possible impact for, you know, on taxpayers and actually ease of doing business in Nigeria?
Yeah, so, I mean, like I said, you know, taxpayers want some form of certainty, you know, in terms of, you know, what I should collect from. I'm an agent of government when I'm charging VAT. So if I'm selling my goods to my customers, I want to know that, okay, can I charge VAT or not? And then if this conversation continues, you know, some states may say, okay, if it's vested on me to charge VAT, I can then look at maybe I can charge 4% as opposed to 7.5% to attract economic activities to my state. So depending on the way the judgment goes, the impact of taxpayers will definitely be felt.
So that means if this judgment is sustained, there's going to be a wider conversation that might need a lot of legal backing. So that, like you said, a state doesn't just wake up to say, oh, I can decide to take 10% VAT.
Exactly.
I can decide to take 2%.
Yeah. So those conversations will definitely be held, you know, because right now, collection of VAT is centralized and there's some form of sanity in terms of collection, you know, and administration. But by the time this is divulged to states, you know, then they have authority to enact their own laws, you know. And at the same time, there may be some political conversation so that we don't run into some chaos.
But from your point of view, which one do you think will pay Nigeria better?
At this point, yeah.
Well, what I would say is I'm up for efficiency, whatever is going to drive efficiency at the state level. But at the same time, you know, there are benefits to central collection, central administration, and then sharing the revenue. So there are pros and cons depending on which way you look at it. But definitely, if the states have power, you know, to enact their own laws and collect VAT, it will definitely drive some efficiency at that level. But there are also benefits for central collection of these taxes.
Okay, so what other areas do you think the tax authorities should focus on, you know, in order to meet revenue needs?
Yeah, for that, you would notice that our tax to GDP ratio has been 6% for some time now. And if you look at our economy, like the informal sector contributes to about 80% of employment, you know, in Nigeria. So I think the focus should move from companies and institutions currently paying taxes to the informal sector. It's not like the informal sectors are not paying taxes, but they are paying multiple taxes, and some of those taxes don't get to the government.
Right.
So streamlining these taxes and using technology, you know, to be able to cover as many taxpayers as possible will go a long way. And don't forget also the social contracts. The more people see what the government is doing with the taxes collected, the more they're encouraged to pay more.
Issue,
yeah, that's another conversation.
That's a very big conversation that we've been having for a long time. And
Absolutely.
we have not been able to, because yesterday we talked about tolls coming back. And like one of our guests said, Nigerians would really not mind if the tolls were there, but we actually see what the funds are being used for.
Yeah.
So also, if you have a conversation with a lot of Nigerians, they'll tell you they really don't mind paying tax, but what is it being used for? The one I paid last year or last month, where is it?
Yeah.
Then I'll be happy enough to pay the
more. Transparency.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, but there was a 56.56 increase year-on-year VAT collection when you compare the 512 generated in the second quarter of 2021. Does this signal an improvement in the tax collection system, or did this just happen?
Well, yeah, of course, I'm sure the FIRS must have put in some effort to increase VAT collection, but then I'm not sure 2020 is a good year to compare because, I mean, there was COVID, there was decline in economic activities, and then there was NSAS at some point. So definitely, if you compare the activities in 2020 to 2021, you're expected to see some improvement. Then if you look at the inflation rate in 2020 vis-a-vis 2021, 2020 was about 13.28%. And in 2021, we are looking about over 15.9% average, in 2021. So when you factor all of that in, and the exchange rate, right, the value of what was collected in 2021 may not be the same as the value in 2020, knowing that, government collects these funds and some of it is going to settle foreign loans. So when you convert based on exchange rate, the significance might not be wide, but it's still some kudos to the FIRS for improving the collection.
Because I wanted to ask you, are you saying we should not, don't pat yourself at the back and say that you had an increase? It was just the situation at the time.
No, I'm saying that, they've tried, but you still need to do more, because if you consider all these factors, right, it shows that, even if you do ×2, you probably need to do ×3 of what you collected last year to be able to meet your obligations,
And we still have the issue where the Federal Inland Revenue Service confirmed that companies with untraceable addresses evaded taxes to the tune of 17.69 billion. That's a big amount. What aspect of the system, should be changed to, cover these loopholes?
Well, I think if you look at the tax laws, we have very robust laws, respect to penalties, for tax defaulters. But I think what needs to be, we need to pay more attention to is implementation. And if you look at what the FIRS alluded to, this loss in revenue is people simply changing address. So what you then need to do to solve that is use of technology. You've identified that there are companies that have defaulted in paying taxes. So for you to be able to identify those companies, that means they were registered with the CAC, for instance. They had principal officers, for instance. They didn't transact business with themselves. They transacted business with third parties. So who are these third parties? These are questions that if you have some form of digital tool to trace the economic activities of these companies, you'll be able to go a long way in actually recovering these taxes.
These questions you have raised seem to support conversations going on that it's not like these problems cannot be solved, like you said.
Yeah.
These guys, they are transacting businesses with people, so you cannot get them directly, you can get them through people and all that. And I don't think Nigeria is such a backward country that you don't have records.
Yeah,
we do have records, but perhaps it is actually the people in the system who would want to compromise, for one reason or the other, because that's part of the conversations that we hear when it comes to tax.
Yeah, I would say that for you to, collecting taxes also comes with some cost, right? For you to collect taxes, you need to spend some administrative cost, So one of the things technology does is to reduce the cost, that you would use to collect these taxes. So I would say that if the Federal Inland Revenue, they've done fantastic work in terms of improving their technological tools to pursue and collect taxes. But I think more improvement needs to be seen in that area, to capture more people and bring more people into tax net.
When you say more improvements and more people, what exactly do you mean? Are there some systems? Are there some computers that ought to be deployed?
What kind of tech,
if you look at, in the past 2 years, what the FIRS has done, there was this project Lighthouse that the FIRS embarked upon, trying to get details of taxpayers and all that. So the FIRS has a lot of data. I think what needs to be done now is what we call data analytics, interpreting the data. Okay, now you know where I stay, you know what I do. What does that mean in terms of tax collection? Bear in mind that even if I trade and I make money, it doesn't mean that I have a taxable income. I could be making losses. So the mere fact that I'm in business doesn't mean that I have tax to pay. So you need to go a step further than collecting information of taxpayers to interpreting what that data means and then be able to use that information to prioritize the taxpayers that you go after. Because you don't have all the money in the world to go after everybody.
Right.
So you have to do some prioritization to say, okay, if I look at all these taxpayers, if I go after 20 people, I may be able to get more revenue. So some kind of intelligence has to go into.
What about connecting? We have BVN, we have NIN, we have the passport, we have our driver's license. Wouldn't that also?
Yeah, that's what I mean. How do you integrate all this information, to be able to achieve your intent in terms of collecting taxes from people or from companies, So that's what data analytics is about. You have the information, but you need to interpret it and make it useful to you for your purpose.
All right, so moving forward now, how do you see tax collection, you know, in the near future in Nigeria?
Well, I think Nigeria has done great, you know, in the past 3 years. Our tax laws before 2019, the last time we updated the tax laws was in 2007. But currently we have a system in place where the tax laws are reviewed annually. I think that's a fantastic initiative, you know, so we've gotten that right. I think the next step is to now take those laws and see how do we efficiently implement them, you know, and how do we compare with other countries of the world? What are they doing with respect to digital economy, you know, because prior to now, taxes were collected. You have to be doing business in the country, and I have to see you physically to collect taxes. But now, businesses are done without physical presence, you know, so we need to continue to evolve, you know, look at our laws and enact laws that are consistent with the times, you know, and then develop tools. You know, there's this conversation to say that who is the accountant of the future? Is it an IT person who has a bit of accounting, or an accountant who has a bit of IT? So right now, technology is the way to go. And I think the FIRS and we all can do a whole lot with technology, and that will reduce our cost and increase our tax to GDP ratio.
I really like that conversation. Is it an IT with a little bit of knowledge of accounting or accountant? But, you know, the 17.69 billion that we're talking about, the tax evasion, they have 90 days. Now, when you talk of this technology, you know, and new ways of doing things, do you see them meeting up with that 90 days, or do we just think this is another news item that we will talk about and later we'll drop it?
Yeah, so there are questions, you know. I think that report came from the Auditor General of the Federation, right? There are questions as to, okay, the taxes that are to be collected, are they final and conclusive, or are they estimates, you know? Because I would assume if these taxpayers have changed address, they've not been filing returns, you don't have access to their records. So at best, maybe the taxes to be collected are estimates. So what the FIRS needs to do is to first dig deeper and establish whether those taxes are actually final and conclusive. And when it's final and conclusive, then you can then begin to engage the taxpayers. Remember that the tax authority, if the tax authority says, okay, you owe the government 20 billion in taxes, it doesn't necessarily mean you do owe the government 20 billion in taxes, because you have to have time to object and to respond. It's when we both agree, or the courts rule, that these taxes are final and conclusive, that the tax authority can legitimately go after and recover these taxes. Then, in terms of collection, assuming the amount is established, does the FIRS have the manpower, the resources, and the tools to actually recover these taxes within 90 days? I think your guess is as good as mine.
Well, just before we let you go, is there anything that can be done to make paying taxes more attractive?
Well, that was what I said about the social contract. You know, in other countries, right, what you do in order to improve tax collection is to focus on voluntary compliance, because you can't go after everybody. You don't have the resources to go after everybody. So if I look at the social contract, which is you pay taxes and I as government will deliver social amenities, you know, then if we both stick to our side of the contract, then there will be improvement in voluntary compliance. There will be reduction in compliance cost. And the government will have more money, you know, to provide all these amenities that we seek. So I would say that as much as the government is doing a lot in terms of enforcement, in terms of audits, you know, it should go alongside with encouraging people to voluntary compliance. If we get that right, you know, we'll be able to have all the money that we need, you know.
Yes, we all have a part to play in this matter.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Adeyemi Adediran, partner at Anderson, Nigeria, and sharing your thoughts with us on tax policy in the country.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
And you too.
Okay.